Okay, here we go. Thursday night at the Voice of College Football. Invite your friends in. It should be a good time. It should be an interesting time because we've got all sorts of news to get to. News concerning the Big 12, news concerning the Pac 12. So I have basically been at it since, all day, but going back to our show with Steve Deace, Michigan podcast, please check it out. It's called The One. You will find it right here on the main channel. Again, it was a great conversation with Steve Deace talking about the situation at Iowa. So check out The One each and every Thursday live at 5 p.m. Eastern time. So I went straight from that to working on an Iowa video. Then we did, of course, our Thursday Night Miami show with the Wholesome One, which leads me right into what I had prepared to talk about, not necessarily prepared to, but mentally prepared to, which is what appears to be a certain move of SMU to the Pac-12. And then we are also understanding, of course, that San Diego State has made its intentions known and has struck its deal to a certain extent. And now we have more news breaking just in the last hour. So we are going to go to that. Even more important, not overall, but more important than even the Great Oreo Challenge. The Great Oreo Challenge is coming soon. You can't miss that. But let's go to the news of the day, the news of the hour. And this is the first time reading this, so it's pretty self-explanatory. Let's dive in. This has gone back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But if you watch us here at the Voice of College Football on a regular basis, you know what I've said over and over and over and over, even when the news reports have said Oklahoma and Texas will be joining the SEC in 2025. Talks have broken down, negotiations have broken down, and it's going to be back to 2025. What have we stated here at the Voice of College Football? It's been my take that, think about this, it was in the summer of 2021 that the SEC struck a deal with Oklahoma and Texas. They have already played 2 full football seasons in a conference that is a lame duck conference for them. And now we're looking at they're going to play a 2023 season and 24, 2 more seasons when USC and UCLA joined the Big Ten 1 year later and would be playing football in a complete sports calendar year 1 year sooner. The SEC was not going to stand for that. No. We could all see that coming. We could all predict it, regardless of the news reports, which I did not say that they weren't valid based on the information, based on what they were being told. But there is no way that anyone wanted this situation to exist another year and then another year. No. The Big 12 does not want to bring in 4 new competitors and have Oklahoma and Texas, despite the revenue that they bring in, both through ticket sales, merchandise that they probably mostly keep, but TV revenue first and foremost. Not that the Big 12 doesn't, in some ways, want to hang on to that, but the Big 12 needs to move on. Get rid of the old, bring in the new, and detach and move on with the future. Much the same with the SEC. The SEC is taking on 2 of the blue bloods, 2 of the power brokers in the sport. They didn't want to have to wait year after year after year after year, 4 football seasons to install a new conference format, new scheduling format. They want to get on with their plans that include Texas and Oklahoma. And so here we are, despite all the recent reports, as recent as last week, that said Oklahoma and Texas are not joining the SEC until 2025. I sat right here and said, I don't believe this is over. They are going to do everything they possibly can, especially the SEC. The SEC is forward thinking. The SEC is all about, we are at the top of the game, the top of the sport. We are the industry standard. We are fast moving. They did not want to see the Big Ten add 2 schools a year after them and have them on the field a year earlier. And so here we have Oklahoma and Texas agree to exit the Big 12 conference after the 2023 football season, 2024 athletic calendar. All right, agreed in principle to pay the Big 12 conference a total of $100 million. That's how much that's worth. That's how much that means to both Oklahoma and Texas, with maybe also the SEC kicking in a few bucks to get this done, settled, done. We're out, and the SEC is ready to roll with its 2 new combatants. The agreement is subject to the final approval from the Oklahoma and Texas governing boards. They will say, check, 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 check. All in favor? While the price tag of fee that the league is describing as foregone distributable revenues seems like a hefty amount to pay for the early exit, both schools are expected to be able to partially offset the cost with future revenues. Well, of course they will. They're leaving a league in which they earn, I think at last report, $31.7 million per school for TV revenue through football. And they're going to a league that's in the 60-some million dollar range and going beyond that. Quote, as I have consistently stated, the conference would only agree to an early withdrawal if it was in our best interest for Oklahoma and Texas to depart prior to June of 2025, Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark said in a prepared statement. By reaching this agreement, we are now able to accelerate our new beginning as a 12-team league and move forward in earnest with our initiatives and future planning. I appreciate the approaches of OU President Joe Haraz and UT President Jay Hartzell to ensure an amicable conclusion to this process and look forward to the bright days ahead for the Big 12 Conference. On July 1st, the Big 12 will officially add BYU, Central Florida, Cincinnati, and Houston to the conference, and it will compete as a 14-team league for the upcoming season. I cannot wait. So at least for one season, one precious season, we will have an oddity in college football. And looking back years later, we will look back at the Big 12 and say, oh, yeah, remember that year when they added those 4 schools, but Oklahoma and Texas were still in the league and they all played each other? Remember, that was fun. So I get my wish for one seat. This is what I was hoping and looking for 1 year. I wanted this for one football season, and I got it. Sources told ESPN recently that both parties were interested in finding a way for the schools to leave early. Yes. Anything else here of consequence? I think that pretty much hits all the boxes. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Of course, I'll look at the comments and questions, but first and foremost, I have left the link in the chat, so join us as we need to rename the show here. I'm going to jump on Twitter to make sure we get some folks in here to talk some college football. So, of course, this is the headliner, and this needed to happen. And again, the SEC was not going to let this slip another year. I was fully convinced of that. Yes, we also saw this report of Damn Beast Media, Georgia Bulldogs football. That's a really long name. You may want to revise that, but that's up to you. The SEC announced today that each member school received nearly $50 million of total revenue, which was divided among the SEC's 14 universities. Yes, we were going to get to that as well. And of course, Clint, in coming days, we will find out what the TV arrangement was, because that was the hang up. But they obviously worked through it rather quickly. There was a holdup last week, but hey, they continue to work at it. And obviously both sides had a motivation. Both had incentive to get this done, especially on the SEC side, but also on the Big 12 side to get this done. And when both parties in a negotiating deal want to get it done, it's one issue when one side wants to finalize it and the other would like things to drag on because it's to their advantage. And to some degree, as I stated before, it would be to the Big 12's advantage to hold on to Oklahoma and Texas as long as possible from a strictly value standpoint. But the league needs to move on. McD Sports says Texas can't wait to be 7-5 every year in the SEC. Based on the way Texas has played over the last decade, 7-5 would be a nice season for Texas in the SEC. But yeah, I would expect some of those seasons for Texas unless they get their act together. All right, it's good to see John Tell here. Says after San Diego State and SMU, I think Fresno State and Rice are key, but why isn't anyone talking about Utah State and Colorado State next? Perfect fits. Okay, well, we will transition to the Pac-12 side of all this. And if you were paying attention to social media and if you were taking awareness to who was showing up at what events, then you had Pac-12 Commissioner George Klyavkov showing up at an SMU basketball game. So conference commissioners do not go to sporting events hosted by other conferences that don't involve their conference. And unless somebody corrects me on that, I don't believe SMU was playing a Pac-12 team. They were probably at this time of year playing a conference game. So that doesn't happen. And there are many other indicators directing us toward an SMU join to the Pac-12. And of course, in addition to that, San Diego State was the first one that was considered to be the one that would move on. My thought was that it was going to be originally, my first original thought after USC and UCLA bolted was that San Diego State was far and away the best candidate. I have to break out of my tendency to be thinking geography, not first and foremost, but it's still on my list and it needs to be dropped further down the list. Geography still plays some level of factor in all of this because of both just cultural considerations, but even more than that, the travel that's involved for not the football teams. Not about the football teams' travel. The football teams can travel 6 times a year and they're fine regardless of where they have to travel. It's more about the other sports having to play complete series or a soccer team having to travel 1,200 miles to play a single soccer game. And so that is the issue in regards to travel. But again, San Diego State and Fresno State were my initial choices. Then after, certainly looking at what I look at, which is television market, brand, football, athletics overall, and combining that with our buddy Tony Altimore's metrics concerning money and endowments and university types, not just university status in rankings, but the type of universities that they are. And of course, the cultural fit and the values fit that SMU was going to be a big player in all of this. And it has turned out to be true. We are going to the phone lines here at the Voice of College Football. We got McD Sports on the line. McD, what's going on?
Hey Mark, how you doing?
I'm good. What's going on with you?
I want to talk about the Pac-12
All right.
expansion, and then I have a little bone to pick with you about something you said in one of your videos.
Okay.
So with the Pac-12, I do think it's a done deal. They're getting San Diego State and SMU. I think it's a done deal. Basically, there's probably a handshake deal. It just hasn't been announced yet. If I'm them, I'll add Fresno State too, just because I think Fresno State. I think they're more of a group of 5 program personally, but there is some name recognition there. But I gotta tell you, Mark,
Hang on. So you believe that the Pac-12 is going to stop with 15 schools? And I'm not saying that that can't happen. I think a lot of the time we're hung up on even numbers. So you're telling us that the Pac-12 is going to add those three.
Those are the three I think they're going to add.
Okay.
If I was them, that would put them at 13.
And Fresno State's going to make it based on name recognition.
I think they're just going to add Fresno State because they're a name recognition, and B, I think they're going to be I think the Big 12 might go after them, and I think the Pac-12 probably wants to try to get as much as Tony said. Tony brought this up, but that's where I'm stealing the idea from. Just try to make have a recruiting base in California,
Yes.
basically. So
Yes.
that's why I would just
So
grab Fresno State just
everything that
off
you
that.
just explained at the end there in regards to tying up California recruiting and also from a television standpoint, uh, basically locking down California, not locking it down. Obviously, the two Big
Mhm.
Ten schools are there, but everything outside of USC, UCLA, staying with the Pac 12 and not having the Big 12 jump all the way over to California and having some level of footprint there. I think that all makes sense. The name recognition thing, I don't think Fresno State is a particularly um, resounding name recognition in college football. But
Okay.
next up,
But those will be the 13-hour ad because I'm going to be honest with you, Mark.
yes,
For them to even consider race, in my opinion, is laughable. Like if they add race, if I'm Oregon, Washington, I would just leave if they add race. I mean, what does race outside of a recruiting base in Houston bring to the Pac-12? Like they don't. I mean, when's the last time they've had a good football season? That's been at least 10 wins.
a real good football season, it's been forever. It doesn't even matter at this point. It has been so long that it's not even recognizable. It's not even, once if you've got to go back to the 1950s or 60s to find a last good football season for any program, it's not even the same program now, so it doesn't even matter. So on that point, from a football standpoint, yes, it's a complete washout. Uh, and I'm not necessarily the person to speak to this, although I've got all the metrics that Tony has run through uh, over the last couple years. And I've certainly cut some videos when I became more familiar with those metrics and I added up all the various uh, facets and components of this to come up with recommendations or what I consider to be viable possibilities for this. But from what I remember, Rice is, of course, as you mentioned, in
Mhm.
Houston. So there is recruiting footprint there and there is television footprint there, although nobody watches Rice football. But maybe if they play in a major conference, that could change. And then also, I believe it's more from an academic and cultural standpoint that Rice would have some value to the Pac 12.
And I respect that completely, but I just can't take race serious. Well, first of all, I don't think that I know I came on here and said that I don't think the Pac-12 is going to be a thing after 2025. I'm going to back off those comments if they add San Diego State, SMU, but this is going to be a group of 5 conference in my opinion, or at least
What's going to be a group of five conference? The Pac 12?
yes.
I don't believe so. I understand your thinking and I understand your opinion, and it's valid from a football standpoint that the level of play may dictate that it's obviously taking a huge hit, but there are so many other contractual factors in play that I don't think that's going to happen. Let's also keep in mind, as I was skating through the Southwest Conference days, that Rice was a member of a major football conference until 1996.
And what has happened since 1996?
They've been a bad football program, but they were a bad football program in the Southwest Conference, but they still had membership. It's almost like Vanderbilt. They had like if Vandy, let's say, got kicked out of the SEC and kind of operated over the next 25 years the way that they have, and we're winning 4 games a year, but we had a big shakeup in college football, and somebody was looking for a prominent school with a great academic tradition that had a football background in a major conference, then maybe Vandy would be uh, an attractive candidate for someone.
And I get that, and I think if the SEC ever kicks out Vandy, I don't think they ever will. I think the Big Ten would be on the phones within 5 minutes trying to pick up Vandy, personally. But I'm I'm just gonna be honest with saying this. I don't see Oregon or Washington staying in this Pac-12 or whatever. That's why I'm saying I think it's gonna be looked at as a Group of Five conference. I think those two schools are gonna bolt towards the Big Ten. It's gonna be. I mean,
What if the Big Ten doesn't want Oregon and Washington? Why would they have waited this? If you really wanted, if you yourself was a commissioner of a conference, or take whatever industry you're in or want to be in, and you were looking to make a transaction and you had two lucrative properties out there, and they were just waiting, and they were practically pleading and begging and making themselves available for you to take, and you put the big hand in their face to say, ah, we'll think about it. Do you think that the Big 12 or the Big 10 is really that? I'm not saying that I know that the Big 10 is not going to take on Washington and Oregon. I just don't know why they would have waited this long and taken this long to consider it.
that's the only thing that worries me. I know right now they don't have a commissioner in the Big Ten because Kevin Warren left for the Bears to be their president. But if I was if I was one of the presidents, let's say I'm the president of Maryland, if looking at getting a new Big Ten commissioner, I would during the interview process I would really key in on, hey, go out and get Washington and Oregon. You get to, I mean, I know the Big Ten wants Notre Dame. We'll see. I mean, who knows what's going to happen there? But I gotta think from afar. I mean, Washington and Oregon are really the only two like big major brands in the Pac-12 right now. I mean, I know Utah, I know Colorado, which I don't think is safe that Colorado stays in the Pac-12. I can see the Big Ten honestly going after them if they don't get Notre Dame and they still want Stanford but don't want Cal. I can see that being the fourth school if they want to stay at that even number. But and my,
If I were the Big 10, and again, I don't have all of what I've read and looked over in the past, but I posted a number of videos about this after it all went down with USC and UCLA. I believe my order of attractiveness to the West for the Big Ten went, I'm taking Stanford number one,
mm,
I'm taking Washington number two, I'm taking Oregon number three, and really everybody else is off the board. I don't
because they
really
want Notre
want
Dame.
anyone else. Well, I'm not talking about Notre Dame. I'm talking
Yeah.
about from the Pac-12. Yeah,
Uh,
Notre Dame's number one. They're way beyond everybody else.
and it might just be, hey, we might get Notre Dame and Stanford and just keep it there. But I can't see Oregon and Washington sitting in this Pac-12
Where are they going to go
without.
to the Big 12?
According to the numbers of Tony, it doesn't make sense for them to go to the Big 12.
Exactly.
So, and now, granted, I could make the argument saying because I know the Pac-12 already got rid of divisions. That's why I said I don't think it matters what even or odd number for that conference. You could you could just sit there before I watched the video with Tony. I just didn't call in because I did want to get his opinion on one thing. I'm going to ask the question here in a second to you that I want to get his opinion on. But you could just sit there and just make the argument hey, this is a weak conference most years. We could probably win the conference every 2, 3 years in the new playoff, get into the playoff. I mean, that might work for those two schools. You could just sit there and make that argument, but I gotta think just from afar, they're just not gonna sit there. those two schools specifically.
Well, again, if they're not going to the Big 12 because it doesn't make sense financially and the Big 10 is not taking them, where are they going to go?
Exactly. Which kind of leads to my next question. I saw this floated out there. I just want to get your opinion on it. Do you think that the SEC should push the Arizona schools?
The SEC?
Yeah, go after
Why?
Arizona, Arizona State.
Just to get out to the West Coast?
Yes.
It's not as ridiculous as it may seem to some. Arizona State and, well, both schools have been decent football programs. And maybe with the injection of the SEC, people may start to show up to the games and it might boost their level of commitment. But any school that's going to join the SEC, I think, would have to display to the SEC that they're serious about football, even though they've got one school in the conference that is not. They've been in the conference forever. But for anyone to join the SEC, I would think um, that they would need to show that they are going to be serious about football. I would think that and I know that these conversations go on anytime there's this type of situation where they roll out, some type of budget plan, all these things. Do you have new facilities coming? What type of fundraising campaigns and ideas and projects do you have? What are the demographics of your alumni base, and all these things are factored in. Are you going to renovate your stadium? Are you going to be an SEC team and not just, we can't just have you out there as a satellite um, school for us to come out and kick around 50-5 every time we show up?
That is true. And I do think those schools are at least somewhat committed, especially Arizona State. I mean, I do think Arizona State's committed. I do think Arizona's committed to a bit of a lesser extent. I mean, I said this about Missouri. They could kind of be Missouri's kind of that program I think could just sit there, win 8 games every year. I could see those Arizona's teams kind of being those programs like, hey, be a tough place to play at, but overall, you're not really going to be competing for championships most years. Uh, that's how I could see those Arizona schools being in the SEC if they join. But I heard that get floated around, and I was like, that's not a bad idea actually. But
Yeah, it's not crazy. It sounds crazy, but it's not crazy. I would say Missouri winning 8 games. I certainly think that they're capable of it. I don't know if it's an Eli Drinkwitz issue because, of course, Gary Pinkel came into the league and won the division
mhm,
twice, but the division was down. And now they basically win 2 or 3 in the SEC, and then they win their 3 or 4 non-conference to get to a bowl game, and that's kind of their formula. But they're really not competing that well in the SEC. And unless the SEC really views those Arizona schools as a way to, as you opened the question, to really stake territory out west, I don't really know what else. They're basically just splitting up money to 2 schools that haven't earned that level of consideration.
true. And Mark, you brought up one of the names that I have a bone with you to pick about in
Okay.
your coach's ranking video.
Oh
How
boy.
do you have Eli Drinkridge and Brett Venables have Mike Loxley?
Because Brent Venables is so okay. Here's how I look at this situation as I do these rankings. It is a ranking for right this second, number one, first and foremost. Although you can't dismiss what's happened in the past, of course. You can't just say, since it's a ranking for right this second, Mike Norvell is one of the top 5 coaches in college football. There has to be continued growth and proof.
Hmm.
I do think that Brent Venables had a lot of issues to deal with at Oklahoma when he showed up. Uh, Basically, his offense ran out on him and went with another coach and went elsewhere. and he had a rough first season with a quarterback who got hurt mid-season or early in the season and missed a lot of time, and he wasn't given a quarterback room that was anything close to Oklahoma's standards, especially after Dylan Gabriel went down. And I think he rallied. I thought at one point in the season, after they lost to Texas by 7 touchdowns, that they were off the rails. What is going on here? And he pulled things together extremely well. They took Florida State down to a last second field goal in the bowl game, and he just recruited a top 5 class. So I'm also looking at recruiting as well, and he's off to a great start, and he's killing it in the transfer portal as well. Eli Drinkwitz, Mike Locksley. Yeah, I understand your point there. Eli is coaching in a better conference with better competition and has to deal with that. Not considerably better because, of course, Maryland's in the Big Ten East. But Eli Drinkwitz, uh, he's basically going 500 at this point. So, I guess Mike Locksley's past. I still he still is proving himself to me. He's done a nice job the last 2 years, but I still just kind of hold on to his past issues to a certain extent.
I respect that, but 6 and 7 is unacceptable at Oklahoma any year, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I stated that
It might
I
have been a bad situation, but
absolutely, and I clearly stated that I do believe that Brent Venables is arguably the best defensive mind in college football, but what he was failed to do at Oklahoma didn't shock me, uh, surprised me because the excuse of him not having his players. I think if you're really good at what you do on one side of the football, that you should be able to take a collection of talent and do something with them that's better than your predecessor. You know, I would expect if Lincoln Riley or Ryan Day went and took over a bad offense, that they would be able to figure some things out to improve that offense. And he didn't. He wasn't able to do that. So I think you have a extremely valid argument. I totally understand it.
and there's one coach, maybe I missed him that maybe he was in the video, I just missed it. I watched it from the beginning to end. And you said these are the rankings right now. How is Pat? And correct me if I'm wrong. How does Pat Fitzgerald have Mike Locksley?
Well, again, there's a balance there between what's going on right this second and what's happened in the past. And even though it's a current ranking, I'm not going to go off the deep end and adjust rankings based on like 1 or 2 poor seasons. I'm not just going to fly off the deep end and say Pat Fitzgerald was a top 10 coach 2 years ago and now suddenly he's a moron and he can't coach. So his ranking has been adjusted considerably because I am highly disappointed in these 2 seasons by Northwestern. They're clearly a horrible football team, and I don't know how he allowed this to get to this point. He again has some challenges there that are well documented that are not what the average college football coach, especially in the Big Ten, has to face, and certainly not Mike Locksley at Maryland. So he's got a big recruiting disadvantage.
And I get that with Northwestern, but I gotta think 4-20 or whatever the record is the past two
Oh, it's
years.
awful.
I mean, I I just can't. If it's a rankings right now, I can't let that go. That's
I understand
the
that, but
immediate.
again, you got to somewhat respect that I just can't. Like I
And
had
I
him
do.
as a borderline top 10 coach 2 years ago, and I don't think he's suddenly an idiot.
I don't think he's an idiot. I just think they recruit at their level, and with them, it's really like every 3-4 years they'll get a good cycle, and if the ball bounces a few ways. I've seen them make 2 Big Ten championship games in the past like 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I know he's capable, but I'm just saying, as of right now ranking, there is no way I could put him ahead of. If you see, the only guy I will put him ahead is Tom Allen in the Big Ten, probably, maybe Shiano, but
And where would you have ranked Pat Fitzgerald 2 years ago?
at probably top 3 or 4.
I would have argued maybe the best coach in the Big Ten 2 or 3 years ago, considering what he had going for him and what he had to deal with versus his competition. But again, I'm not going to drop a guy from 10 to 60, even based on 2 horrendous years. Now, if he gives us another one, and it looks like he probably is,
Yeah, I was gonna say, but she will.
then yeah, I've got to punish him quite a bit. I don't know what that means, but I can't imagine ranking Pat Fitzgerald as like the 55th best coach in the country, but that's probably about where he's going to be.
So it looks like David Shaw 2.0, basically.
Yeah, but
Bit
he
difference.
built
Difference.
that.
Yeah,
David
he
Shaw
did build
didn't build
that.
anything.
That
He
is true.
inherited. So, but you're
That
right. Yeah, it's ugly.
that was a weird hire at Stanford, in my opinion. But that's just me.
Well, the guy's a winner. He's
That
won
is
at that
true.
level, so and he's in the area. So they must have that must have been some type of a connection for whatever reason, maybe recruiting. I
And
don't know.
that's how Jim Hall that's how Jim got hired. He was FCS head coach. So
Yes. All right, McD.
34. All right. Thanks for
Pre-
taking my call, Mark. Go
Absolutely.
Terps.
All right, before we get to the next call, we got John. I did read this. I was in the middle of answering this. So we talked about Fresno State and Rice. Basically, John, I appreciate the super chat, but no one's talking about Utah State and Colorado State because I think you're looking at them being perfect fits, and I don't know exactly what you're looking at besides geography. I don't know what those 2 programs bring from a football standpoint. Nothing. They're just and from a TV market and a following standpoint, what do they bring? Nobody's, especially Colorado State. My goodness. Now Utah State's had a nice little following, and they had a nice little run against with Mike Wells, and now with Gary Anderson, and they had another bowl season this year. But man, I just think those two. Now look at where San Diego State's located. Football players all over the place. Fresno State, Northern California, San Francisco area. Players will want to go there. SMU, of course, Dallas, Texas. We don't need to say anything else. And with those schools jumping to a major conference, then they're naturally, it would be easier for any knucklehead to walk into anyone's living room of a recruit and be able to recruit more effectively to the Pac 12 than to the American Conference or the Mountain West. And especially if they're going to go to a major TV market and a desirable area, we'll say, versus Utah State and Colorado State. I just don't think that there's a whole lot, unless you like to go hiking, uh, that's in play there. All right. Next up here, the voice of college football, we got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great, Mark, because, when you chase greatness, it's always elusive. But the SEC got one step closer today, Mark. I was worried for 1 year the Big Ten fans were going to argue, well, they were better than the SEC because they brought in USC and UCLA. Now we don't have to worry about that. In my opinion, this is the last year where realistically any conference can claim that they're better than the SEC. I just don't see any realistic way once Texas and Oklahoma get added that they can be possibly better.
Well, I agree. I would still like to see the games played and then evaluate the results from there. But yes, Oklahoma and Texas are 2 tremendous additions. The SEC is already the best. then they add a better pair than USC and UCLA, at least as it stands right now. I can't disagree with you, but we'll make the evaluation when they play the games.
Oh, absolutely. But I don't know how obviously those games are going to be played, but I doubt it. There's going to be tons and tons of upsets of where the SEC just falls apart. Now, it could happen, but it hasn't happened yet, and I see no way it can happen in the future. According to 24/7 Sports, Texas had the third best recruiting class. Oklahoma had the fourth best recruiting class. It means the SEC had 5 of the top 6 recruiting classes this year, Mark.
Yeah.
5 of the top 6.
I know. And we also broke all this down in a video where the SEC had 21 5-stars and the Big 12 had 7. Well, unfortunately for the Big 12, those 7 are not going to Texas Tech and Oklahoma State and so forth. They are going all 7 to Texas and Oklahoma. Therefore, they are going to be playing, except for their freshman seasons, which are going to be largely inconsequential in the SEC. So basically, it's a 28 5-star total for the SEC versus 0 for the Big 12.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just crazy. And you know what's a shame, Mark? And what's really sad to me is not all these talent will be recognized as the 12 best teams once the playoffs expand. What we need and what we're going to have is a 10-2 Utah or a 10-2 Oregon or a Clemson, a North Carolina, or Florida State teams that I believe will not be evenly matched at any way, shape, or form, playing against these 4th, 5th, and 6th best SEC teams going forward.
Anybody out there that is reasonable and take your bias out of it, just list the teams in the SEC with Oklahoma and Texas included. Okay, you've got generally Vandy at the bottom, and then probably the second worst, not the second worst team right now, but the program that is the least capable of acquiring great talent would be Missouri. And then after that, like the 14th, now it's not going to be reflected in the record because they've got to play all those other SEC teams, but like the 14th best team in the SEC might be Texas A&M, South Carolina, Arkansas, somebody like that.
Based on recruiting this year, it would be Kentucky, which had the 31st best class in the country.
Wow.
Oh, and according to Steve Dace's talent rankings that you saw on Michigan podcast, Kentucky this year would be the 11th most talented team in the country. Not in the conference, in the country.
Were you surprised to see that?
I was definitely surprised. I thought Kentucky was going to have a 5-7 season, and I still think that's possible. You know, Mark, in the SEC, when every game is a tough game, every game is tough. So it's possible they can start out 5-0. And I can see them losing to Missouri, South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia. There's no real layups in the SEC anymore. Even Vanderbilt, who has been kind of a clear last place team over the years, they're starting to get it together to where they can be capable once in a while of beating somebody who's not shown up.
Vandy obviously showed life outside of. I was disappointed with their last effort against Tennessee. I thought they might give Tennessee a game, but you beat Kentucky and Florida. I know that that's very embarrassing for those two teams, but they did it. They did it twice. They won 2 of those games, so that showed me something. Okay, they followed up what could have been a fluke with another one, so maybe it's not a fluke. Too bad it was late in the season because that would have been great if it would have been like weeks 3 and 4, and then it would have been like, oh, what is this team capable of doing? Maybe they'll pull off another 2 upsets like this. So they're still at a huge disadvantage. But as Clark Lee let us know this past summer, he is building the greatest football program in the country.
Yeah, but can we do something about bowl games? I mean, Vanderbilt went 5-7 this year, and let's be honest, they deserve to be in a bowl game more than half of the teams that actually made it.
Yeah, a bunch of group of 5 teams that were 6-6.
Yeah,
Sure.
why do we have a 6-6 record as a hardliner when the schedules are so clearly lopsided against certain teams?
Do you want 5-7 teams in bowl games?
I want the best teams in the bowl game.
Okay.
I think
Just like the playoff, you're taking the same approach to the bowl games. Okay.
Yeah, because to me, you can have a 5-7 team, but if the 7 losses were to all the best 7 teams in the country, I don't see why they should not be avoided in bowl game.
I can't argue with that in any such way. For some reason, I don't like it, but I can't really argue against it. I would love to see Vandy go play in the Mountain West for a season and see how they would do.
And I'll give you another example. Arizona. I thought Arizona was a capable team this year. I know they finished 5-7, but
Yep.
I think they should have been in a bowl game. Just because they had some record that was below 500 doesn't actually mean they're one of the bottom half of teams in the country.
Yeah, those two would be the best example. Michigan State was really not that good. Miami was just awful. Those are the other 5-7 teams that come to mind. West Virginia.
Yeah, and we already, I mean, the college football already allows some 5-7 teams to make it. It wouldn't even be the first time a 5-7 team made a bowl game.
When they need spots, and Vandy obviously would be, I would think, at the head of that class if that would have been needed this year because of the academic requirements.
Yeah, I get you, but I just think the whole structure is going to have to change anyway. Because let's be honest, the Citrus Bowl, the Music City Bowl, the Liberty Bowl, the Duke's Mayo Bowl, I mean, they're already so diminished because of the playoff. Well, having 12 teams is just going to diminish them more. And you're going to have to find some type of way to bring in fans or bring in some television audience.
And elevating Vandy to a bowl game is going to do that?
Well, first off, they're a Power 5 team, so I think they would have some more fan base out there than some of these lower level group of 5 teams.
Yeah, and we're to a point with the bowl structure where we're not just talking about the best of the group of 5 going to bowl games. We're talking about 6-6 group of 5 teams going to bowl games. It's pretty bad.
Like, I think Middle Tennessee has less fans than Vanderbilt.
I would think so.
So, I mean, that would only help them out. If Vanderbilt played Arizona, that would be seen as a kind of cool story.
True. Yeah, I would watch Vandy and Arizona play. And I also just don't think it's about their particular fans, but there are, I think we can all speak to this. Everybody in the chat, to a certain extent, I would think, are more likely to watch the teams that their favorite team competes against, teams in their conference. They're more likely to flip on that game than just some random Georgia Southern, Utah State, famous Idaho Potato Bowl game.
Mark, I'm reading your chat as we're talking. One Scoop John says, since Vanderbilt lost 56-0 to Tennessee and lost by 20 to Wake Forest, then, you just can't be in a bowl game. Losing to one of the, 5 best teams in the country by a lot automatically disqualifies you from a bowl game, Mark. I just been told this by One Scoop John. What do you think about that?
Well, I kind of agree with both of you in this way. If you are merely talking about the evaluation of the best teams in the country from top to bottom, then we've got to consider that Vanderbilt's better than a ton of those group of 5 teams that go to bowl games. But I just don't think that most people want to see teams that had losing records advance the bowl games. They want to see bowl games started out as, or for the bulk of the time that bowl games have been in play in college football, a reward for teams that had a successful season.
Yeah, but see, the word, I don't understand why people tie successful to a 500 record. I think there's more nuance than that when it comes to the discussion.
Well, technically in sports, success equals winning and failure equals losing. And regardless of whether you're losing to the best teams in the country or you're beating the worst teams in the country, that's kind of what it is.
Well, right, but this isn't like professional football where they're all evenly playing out an even schedule. I mean, we have some pretty extreme examples.
Oh, you've made your point, a real MVP. I don't think that anybody would disagree with your evaluation that Vandy or some other team in the SEC in particular, and maybe the Big Ten and elsewhere that are 5-7 teams are better than 6-6 group of five. I don't think that's because the same logic holds true that there are tons of 8-5 teams in the SEC and in the Power Five that are better than 11-2. This gets proven over and over. You know, Texas went 5-7 2 years ago, and they hammered Louisiana by 3 touchdowns, and Louisiana was 13-1 and ranked top 15 in the country. That's why they shouldn't be ranked top 15 in the country.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So
and
let
I'm
me
not
ask
just
you
cherry picking. I could recite scores for hours like that.
Right. So with the difficulty that the SEC has compared to other conferences going forward, in most likelihood, do you think there's going to be an 8-win SEC team make a 12-team playoff eventually?
If the SEC continues to become more and more dominant, yes, I think it will take some time. But if that's just ingrained that, wow, the SEC is 16-4 in playoff games over the last 8 years, and you know they've won 6 of the 8 national championships, and we're looking at 8-4 Tennessee against 10-3 Oregon, who lost the Pac-12 championship game. Well, you know what? Tennessee played Alabama, Georgia, maybe Florida's going to be really good by then. They played all these teams. Well, they're actually better.
Right. And then you know what's going to happen if that happens, Mark, which I've been accused of in the chat already. There's going to be claims of SEC bias. And then once that happens, I know where it's going to head. It's going to say we need to expand the playoffs some more.
You are biased toward the SEC, correct?
Of course, I have some bias, but the overplayedness of it is a bit much. Like, I try to be objective as much as I think I can be. But I think saying it's clearly the best conference isn't biased. I think based on the results of the game, it's just my opinion on it.
New Mexico State made a bowl game, 7-6. And we've got, let's see, out of the Mountain West, we got Utah State at 6-7, making a bowl game. San Diego State 7-6. Yeah, we've got 6-6 teams that lose bowl games and finish 6-7. That happens every year.
Yeah, and Utah State lost to Weber State or something like that at the beginning of the season. Some FCS team or something like that.
Yeah.
So they weren't even a good Mountain West team, but I think this is all setting up for the playoffs to be expanded to 24 or even 32 teams.
Oh, my goodness. Let's not take that on tonight. DeReal, we got the callers piling up here.
Well, that's good to hear, Mark. I've done my part and hit the like button, so I hope others will follow.
You always do your part. Thanks, DeReal. Moving on here at the Voice of College Football, let's keep in mind Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC in 2024. Hate to brag about it, but I did state off the top that despite all the reports about 2025, I stated over and over and over and over for the last few months, I did not see it dragging out to 2025 for various business and branding reasons and PR reasons. And also we've got Charlie Strong, passed over as the defensive coordinator at Miami, says, see ya. Not good enough for me to be linebacker coach, in favor of Lance Guidry, who would have been the Tulane defensive coordinator. I hate to see this. Lance Guidry, Marshall defensive coordinator, gets hired at Tulane, spends about all of 2 weeks there, probably, hung out with a few of his defensive players, while they did bench presses. And then I'm out, I'm going to Miami now. I don't know that something shouldn't be done there in terms of college football, that there shouldn't be some type of penalty. You took a job, Anyway. And so that we've got that. And again, as we headline the show, we like, based on all the information that we gather and much of it from our buddy Tony Altamore, that San Diego State has made its decision to go to the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 more so and more importantly has made its decision. And then, of course, SMU as well. Defiant Productions. Defiant. This should be quite the conversation. Hello, hello. Defiant, are you here? Okay, we're going to put you back in the back room there, and you can stay on the line and join us when you recover from your nap. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, we've got Porter on the line.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening, Porter. How are you?
Congrats. You're exactly right. You did say that you thought they would come in earlier. So I did too, but I don't have a program like you where I have to live up to or have to eat my words in case.
I have had to do that too.
So, but I mean, I'm so over the moon excited about this. By the way, last time I called in, you had you described me as the #1 UGA alumnus. So is that showing up on there? I can't tell, but
did I really?
Yeah,
and that was prompted by what?
Yeah, after the national championship game.
Okay.
#1 UGA alumnus, which
awesome.
I looked at it the next day, and I was flattered by that. So thank you.
You've been elevated over the likes of Matthew Stafford, Fran Tarkenton. I would only be able to name football players that have gone to UGA, besides, of course, Dominique Wilkins. I would throw him in there as well.
Even Hines Ward.
Hines Ward, yes, of course.
Well, hey, but anyway, yeah, I am over the moon excited about this whole thing. Mark, our sport is about to take off like a rocket. It's already the second most popular sport in America, I think. I think it's more popular than NBA. What's got me excited about OU and Texas coming in on 24 is it just makes it so much cleaner because it aligns with the expansion of the playoff. And I think everybody wanted that.
Yes.
When this 12-game playoff happens, the popularity of our sport it's already popular, but it's going to be even more popular. I am so excited about what this 12-game playoff is going to do for places that normally, in December, they're preparing for some bowl game, and now they're going to be preparing for a playoff game. You're going to have, obviously on-campus games. I'm not going to rehash all the. What's going to happen, but it's just going to be amazing how excited all these campuses all over the country are going to be, and I say that as someone whose alma mater has done quite well in the first playoff 1.0. But I care about our sport. So, and I know I say that all the time, but I just the reason question for you in terms of the popularity of our sport. First of all, do you agree that college football is the second most popular sport in America?
So I think I was in a great position for many years to evaluate the popularity of various sports. And I think I was I think about those kind of things. So those are the type questions and the type conversations that resonate with me. So I look at TV ratings and I look at attendance and I look at trends and I look at who young people are interested, what they are interested in doing and watching and all those things. And I used to get that data on a regular basis at my old job. And so that very much interested me. Now, of course, doing what I do, I'm inundated with college football 24/7, 365, as opposed to the aforementioned NBA, which I pay no attention to. So I do think that it's difficult for any one person to, unless they do this for a living or they're really ingrained in it, to pull themselves back and understand that, there is high levels of popularity for things that they don't have any interest in. So obviously we tend to downgrade. Like I I don't know how many NBA players I could name off the top of my head. Now, if I was shown a list, I would recognize a bunch of names, but I don't pay attention to the NBA. I know that the NBA ratings have suffered tremendously in the last 3 to 4 years. Is it the most popular, second most popular sport?
Let me ask you this way, Mark.
Football's just different. It's an event sport. Basketball, the NBA in particular, I think that there are a lot of people out there that like to watch highlights, like to watch certain players play. It's a very individualistic league. But I would, if push came to shove, I agree with you that college football's number 2.
Well, let me ask you this way. Let's set the other sports aside. They just announced that Ohio State and Georgia drew was it 22.4 million number?
Yep, something like that.
So, the highest rating in the country or this year. How does, just so I get and the listeners can get a perspective, how does that compare to, say, a premium matchup on Sunday Night Football? Let's say the Packers and the Bears. What are we talking? What numbers are we talking about on Sunday Night Football? And that's just you can ballpark it.
Yeah. I did check out NFL ratings not that long ago, but they're really not sticking to my head. I wouldn't want to say this for sure, but I think Sunday Night Football would be slightly ahead of that. Not by much.
I know for years, we used to get Entertainment Weekly at our house. Sunday Night Football was always the most popular show on TV for the week, and then it now is considered the most popular TV show on TV. Obviously, it's seasonal, but anyway, my point is, when you do a 22.4, I mean that is a very strong number, and especially with people out partying New Year's Eve and all that. So,
and I believe that was 22.4 million people watching. Right. I don't believe that was a 22.4 rating, was it? I'd have to check that out.
I don't know, but I just think that I mean this is I don't know. I'm excited as an SEC guy. I'm excited to have these two programs come into our conference. I know you're excited, with the Big Ten, with the expansion. It's my understanding the Big Ten is expanding the same year. Is that right? 2024.
Absolutely. And the way you phrase that, Porter, I have to bring up the only issue I ever have. Not that we don't disagree on things, but I love to see your name ready to take your call because we have great conversations. You're a fervent fan and you're also a knowledgeable fan. So I enjoy our conversations. But the only thing I take exception to is that you basically pin me down as a Big Ten guy.
I'm sorry.
I'm a national guy.
I know.
All of college football.
I know. Sorry. But I mean, we all have to have a team to kind of get into the sport. So, but yeah, well, let me ask you a few things just about I had a few questions about the playoff itself. Maybe you can answer. When it says that the hosting team in the first round can host either on the campus or I forget what the phrase is, but a
regional.
Like let's just say Ohio State is hosting and they see a bad storm coming through, they can move it to possibly the Dome in Indianapolis or something like that. Is that right?
Yes.
Or Detroit if it's available. I thought that was the case. Now, why would I guess if you're a Wisconsin or somebody like that has a ground and pound type offense, you probably wouldn't want to do that regardless of the weather. Is that right? I'm just trying to think strategy with something like that. Why would somebody, if they had the advantage of the weather, especially the Big Ten, Ohio State's the only team I can think of based on their offense that would want to move that game indoors. Do you agree with that?
I would hope, and as I'm listening to you, I am surveying NFL ratings versus what you brought to the table concerning the playoffs, and actually, the playoff attendant or the playoff amount of viewers, especially for that Ohio State Georgia game, substantially higher than Sunday night. I've gone through about 5 Sunday night games. It's
Oh, wow.
substantially higher.
Oh, wow.
No, the
Okay.
Sunday night games are more in the 15 to 17 million range as opposed to 22.5 million.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's
Yep.
strong. Good.
Now the conference championship game this past weekend, that Chiefs Bengals game, was 53 million people watching that game.
Yeah. See, nobody's ever going to, I mean, not in my lifetime, nobody's ever going to catch the NFL. And I'm fine with that. I mean, it's the greatest athletes in the world competing. I have no problem with that. But
so back to your question, I would hope that the football people would win that argument and that decision. Like, let's say it's Wisconsin. Wisconsin's hosting Georgia. Well, Georgia's going to have a really down year. But anyway, they're hosting whomever. And yes, I would hope that the powers that be at Wisconsin, in terms of the football program, that the decision would be highly dictated by the strategy to win a football game, not to, play to our boosters who want to be comfy and cozy, in some dome somewhere.
yeah, so the way you understand it, it's the home team's decision on whether or not that game is moved. Is that right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. And then the other thing is, have you heard of anybody looking at curtailing their regular season and going to 10 or 11 games? Because the only negative about this playoff is it really is going to be a meat grinder for these kids.
Yeah.
And I know they have NIL now and all this other stuff, but I mean, when you're talking 16, 17 games, I mean, that's ridiculous.
You know what's funny, and I don't fault you for doing this because almost everybody else seems to do the same thing. When we start to talk about the health of the athlete, like that money compensates health.
Yeah, I know.
Like it's just so horrible that we need to be, having better technology and better this and that and safer rules and all this other business when it comes to football. But when push comes to shove and, oh, well, they're going to be out there anyway, and maybe we're going to push because we want to see more football and expand a playoff, or in the NFL, shoot, they've expanded to 17 games. Why? That makes absolutely no sense to me. Why is a 17th game needed and an extra playoff team in each conference? But that, oh, well, we're going to pay them more money. So that makes it all good.
Well, I mean, hey, Mark, it goes back to the old adage. I'm sure you and your grade school buddies back in the 80s said the same thing. Remember when people like Michael Spinks were getting knocked out in 30 seconds by didn't we always tell each other, hey, I'd go in the ring for 30 seconds for $8 million.
Oh, absolutely. There is something to that. Yes, there is.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll let somebody else get on. So thanks, man.
Thank you, Porter.
See you.
All right. Welcome to the Voice of College Football, everyone. We appreciate you all being here, and we're going to our buddy David Greenshields here. Look at this.
Yes, to the man that gives college football its voice, the great Mark Rogers. Hi, and how are you, sir?
I am doing just fine, David. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure. Enjoyed your conversation today with Mr. Dace on trying to solve Iowa's offensive issues.
If you could tell, I enjoyed it too.
Yeah, I find it interesting just for the simple fact that, well, I made a couple of comments, and I think Dace kind of touched upon this. Maybe you did as well. Do you think that just some programs are just happy to be where they're happy to be?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if Corey or if your Iowa people have touched on this, but maybe they're okay with understanding they're an 8-9 win program, and they're good with that. And you know what? More power to you, Kirk.
They're a 7-win program, David. They've established that if they win 7, that's a successful season because they're handing out bonuses based on winning 7 games.
Yeah, but they've had 8 wins within the last 5 or you
I'm
know what I
just
mean?
playing devil's advocate that they've pretty much made the statement that in giving the bonus on 7-win season. So this is where I will defend Iowa and schools like them to a certain extent. There has to be a level of frustration. If you're in competitive sports at that level, you've obviously devoted your life to it. You make a lot of money based on being really good at what you do. You've excelled through probably maybe as a player, but certainly as a coach and all those things.
Right.
And you're in a situation where we're really good at what we do and we're a top 20 team, 25 team, something in that range, but the top 5 are there and we have A, B, C as disadvantages. Should we really bang our head against the wall thinking we can compete when it's highly doubtful that we can? So why stress ourselves to that degree to try to keep up with the Ohio States of the world because we just don't have those type of resources?
Well, I mean, that's where, in many ways, that college football, well, even more so nowadays with NIL and some other things, is becoming like it's just dollars and cents.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
even before that.
oh, sure. That's why maybe you should become the voice of semi-pro football instead of the voice of college football, Mark. Because guess what? There isn't a line anymore, I don't think. There used to be a line, by the way. There is no line anymore. I think that line is getting obliterated as we move forward here.
Yes, it's as blurry can be on your eye chart.
Right.
B Bean, Iowa's top 20 with a question mark. Yeah, that's a rough general statement. Yes, I will back that up as generally in that range from year to year.
Well, I think also Dace's comment about, maybe Kirk has felt that he's tapped out where he can take that program, I thought was a really good point on Steve's part. That maybe that the days of being 2002 Iowa, the Brad Banks team that he had a couple of really good NFL players on that team, and Bob Sanders and Dallas Clark, I
Oh
believe.
yeah.
And being able to get to that level. By the way, that was at a time in the early 2000s when the Big Ten was more competitive maybe than it is right now.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting. I've always known of Iowa's having fairly good tight end play. When they are pretty good. The other thing too that surprised me is they can't get offensive line play. You'd think Midwestern program. I mean, Wisconsin's got an offensive line play right over the years. I'm surprised Iowa can't, find some road graders in the Midwest that can play offensive line.
They have
I don't
that
think
reputation, but it's
yeah.
not reality. It's history. Yeah, they have not had good offensive lines for a while. Now going back to your thoughts about and our SEC friends you may want to know that yes, if you weren't back during the run of roughly 2002 to 2005, that the Big Ten probably did have the best conference in college football.
It's close. Yeah.
But so I tried to make this clear, and I don't know if I was effective, that I agreed with Steve, because if you look at where is Iowa located, what resources do they have, what's the recruiting footprint, and all of that, it's understandable to say, hey, if they're going 8-4, 9-3 every year and going to decent bowl games, that's about where they should be, and Kirk has probably maxed that out. However, when you look at it in addressing the issue that we were addressing, if you're rolling out top 5 defenses and top 5 special teams, and
Right.
you're rolling out bottom 5 offenses, and I know this year was somewhat of an aberration, but generally like bottom 20 offenses, well, if Wisconsin can have a capable offense most of the time, and
Yeah.
Purdue has had good offenses, and Nebraska, even under Mike Riley, if you can achieve to the level of a 70th, 60th ranked offense, well, you can't. If you could be that good in 2 other areas of the football program, why can't you be capable, competent, functional in the other one and see what happens.
Yeah, and you especially think with today, maybe you can get into the portal. You can find a really good offensive player. Maybe you find your Kenneth Walker Jr. the same way Michigan State did. You find that impact running back, skill player, whatever the case might be. And the other thing, Mark, is they're on the weaker side of the Big Ten in divisions. I mean, you keep coming back to that point.
And there's really good group of 5 quarterbacks. We see group of 5
Yeah.
quarterbacks that that are better than most Iowa quarterbacks.
Yeah. Wouldn't you know, by the way, as an Ohio State fan, the one time Brian Ferentz designed a good offensive game plan was in 2017 against Ohio State, when he may have coached the pants off of Craig Schiano as defensive coordinator.
This is true, man. 55. Wow.
Yeah, you want a shining moment maybe in the Brian Ferentz era from an Ohio State perspective. Take a look at that 50-some burger that he dropped against us when we found out that Iowa had good tight ends. By the way, really good tight ends on that team. They had Fant and Hawkinson, I think, were both on that team.
Yeah. So I'm working on a video right now. They were 66th in points per game. So take away that 55 burger. They were probably the 80th ranked offense in scoring that year. But on a magical day at Iowa City, they knocked Ohio State out of the playoffs.
Yeah, it didn't help that JT Barrett started throwing picks and, the roof totally caved in. I did want to throw out something. I'm going to circle back to what I just mentioned about kind of like, college football and where it's going here in the future. And, I probably already put this in the comments, but I just want to kind of maybe go back to it again as kind of a future comment for you and Steve. By the way, is it going well? Do we see a continuation of the one program going forward on Mark Rogers TV, by the way?
I sure hope so, David. We're going to do our best. I do need to cover a level of costs for that. So
I understand.
So we want that to take off, whether that's through sponsorships or just sheer volume of views. That would be phenomenal. So anything you can do on our behalf there.
You have a fan. I'm trying to spread the word as best I can.
Spread the word. Thank you so much for that.
But as a future topic, and I know I probably you maybe mentioned this, and you Steve have kind of talked about it, but I don't know if you've done a full show on it. That's why I'm going to go there. Is just what future landscape of college football overall come 2024 and beyond, and what are we looking at as a sport? Once the SEC adds its teams, the Big Ten adds its teams, and we start to get to a 12-team playoff, what does the future of our sport look like? And is the future of the sport for the best or positive direction, negative direction, just kind of overall encompassing, where we see college football going 2024 and beyond? What do you think?
I think that come 2024 and beyond, if I can get past all of the periphery stuff that clutters our minds and clutters our game and the landscape, all the transfer portal stuff, all the NIL, once we get into the structure of the season and these games mean this much and we're headed toward a playoff and all these various teams are in contention, and it makes it exciting when we see Auburn and LSU are both 8-2, and otherwise that would have just been a nice little top 15 matchup. But now it has huge playoff implications, and all lead once I click on the games on Saturday headed toward a 12-team playoff, then that's what's positive about the sport going forward. What's negative is what continues to clutter the headlines throughout, especially the off season with, we're just going to see more of, unless somebody really comes out of nowhere and takes it, gets a handle on all this, we're going to continue to see Jaden Rashada, $13 million.
Yeah.
We're going to see all, just a mess of things that a lot of people find interesting and fun to talk about and gossip about and all that, but I really don't. I don't enjoy it. I don't like it. I've got to talk about it, but that's not what I like. And the transfer portal, again, from a free agency standpoint and for a conversation piece, it makes it very interesting when Sam Hartman, as one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, decides to go to Notre Dame. That's becomes then an interesting conversation and something for Notre Dame fans to look forward to. But I just don't like the overall look of players no longer being one school players. And I don't know what that percentage and ratio is going to look like 10 years from now, but it's certainly not going to be what it was circa 2020 and before.
Well, I just want to make a few points. First of all, I think that, and I'm not one of those that's opposed to change, but I'm not one of those people that says change for the sake of change, you know? And you got to tell me what the change is for me to say whether it's a good change or a bad change. And there's also a line that goes way back. It's called if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's also a common phrase that's been used about, I don't know, about 10 to 15,000 times or more. I don't know, maybe. But I mean, you get the point. I mean, if you have a good thing, I mean, why is there, a need for it? And that's some of my concern is, and like I said, there's some changes I like. Major League Baseball instituted instant replay. I actually think that's been a change for the better. There you go. You want a change in one of the major sports in this country that's been a change for the better? There you go. Do I think a 12-team playoff is a change for the better? I have my doubts. I certainly have my doubts about the transfer portal. And, I really have my doubts about NIL. And I expressed that to you from the early stages because I think it's already being used in a way that it wasn't supposed to be used for, which is to buy recruits. It was never supposed to be used to buy recruits. It was supposed to be designed to, if a college student comes to your program, he can make money off of his name, image, and likeness if he wants to do advertising for XYZ company. It wasn't meant for programs to drop the bags and pay for players. We all know that. We used to laugh at like what SMU did in the 80s. Remember that documentary they did on ESPN, the 30 for 31, where
Sure.
they're actually, I mean, they weren't saying Eric Dickerson got a Trans Am, saying that that's a good thing, that those things should be happening. They were actually condemning what they were doing. Now we're doing it and we're like, oh, that's child's play. I mean, are you serious? It seems like that's the direction we're going. Am I off base with that as a thought, Mark?
Well, NIL is all about just giving the student athlete the same rights as any American has. Basically, at its core, that's what it is. They shouldn't be deprived of that opportunity. However, because of the process of high school football recruiting and schools with a
But am
lot
I
of
right to
money
say that it wasn't supposed to be structured in the way to buy recruits? It was supposed to be, if you come to my school, become star player, you can make money off your name, image, likeness. There's a difference. There's a very
absolutely.
fine.
There's a huge difference.
There's a huge difference
but,
between those two
but
things.
the powers that be have to be completely stupid and foolish to have thought that without any regulation, that it was going to simply be by good nature and everyone doing the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing, that it was going to be as intended without rules.
Well, you don't have an enforcement arm, Mark. How worthless is the NCAA in the history of worthless organizations?
Well, it's becoming more and more for any knock against the NCAA, and there are a zillion valid ones through the years. At least it could have been said that they did enforce, whether it was fair or it was uneven. All those things could be said about it, inconsistent, all of those things. At least when they acted and they did enforce their rules. Now they might have been again in it was very shaky and just in spots in which they were able to levy their judgments, but they did. Now they're not touching anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, they monitor what they want to monitor. They're very selective about what they choose. And then for something on this big a scale, for them not to be involved just seems like a joke.
Well, that's kind of my point, is that they've
Yeah.
got a history of monitoring what they want to monitor, and
Right.
when they would get involved and make a judgment, they were a strong organization. Now, it wasn't consistent. Now, because they haven't acted during this 2-year window at all, I have to think that they have pretty much considered this something that they are not going to get involved in and not going to try to regulate themselves.
Yeah, but this is like Pearl Harbor-ish for college football, Mark. This is a big deal. This is something that they got, if they don't have a dog in this fight. I mean, seriously. I mean, I don't get that.
The only thing that I've heard, and maybe some people in the chat can correct me and enlighten me to some things, the only activity out of the NCAA that I've heard of during this entire NIL era has been that they sent some of their investigators to Miami to talk to John Ruiz very early in the NIL process, and then we didn't hear anything more about it.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Oh, John's got some bags of cash, I think, right now going out. Yeah, I think that the thing about it is too, Mark, is that I mean, by the way, I will say also the 12-team playoff, because that's obviously huge with the structure of the sport. I do think that the Clack comment could be true. I mentioned that to you before about like in the early stages, maybe this leads to the same championship games, the same champions that we're always going to get that we had in a 4-team era. We're going to have those same things again in a 12-team era. But maybe as time eventually goes on, maybe there's some upsets that are made. Maybe some teams win some games. Maybe some teams have a run to where they at least get to a semis or a championship game out of nowhere. And maybe that helps them in recruiting. Although I really wonder if, like, you know, TCU getting to a championship game this year is going to help them in recruiting. But you know, who knows? Maybe long term there can be some benefit that way.
When you made the statement that you are still questioning whether a 12-team playoff is good for the sport, I think that there are a number of ways in which it won't be good for the sport, but I believe that overall it's needed and necessary to provide more even and equal opportunity across the map to everyone. It's not perfect by any stretch. But if we were jumping, if we could have in 1995 been able to foresee what the next 30 years would look like.
Yeah.
And you said you're going to jump from where we were at that point, for as much as I did not like the vote, you know, ruling college football, but we're going to spin it forward 30 years and there's going to be all these ramifications involved in this, of the bowl structure, you know, declining and all these other things. I would have been hesitant to say, yeah, this 12-team playoff would be great. That would be my first response, would be 12-team playoff. Absolutely, sign me up.
Right.
But then you start to think about the ramifications. I would have said no. But since we've already arrived at this place where the playoff is everything, and the bowl system has been broken down and bowl season's been discarded, we've already arrived at this place. So I think the pluses of going to a 12-team playoff mitigate the issues or the cons, because we've already experienced, I think, most of the cons.
Well, remember how the 90s worked out. You had those split national championships that year.
Yes.
That begat the BCS, which begat the 4-team playoff, because we had problems with the BCS. And people says, well, why don't we have a playoff in the early 2000s? We need a playoff to resolve these things. That begat the 4-team playoff. And now we keep on begathing, you know, with 12-team playoff, you know. Once the die is cast, Mark, you know what I mean?
But the difference in this step is now we have inclusion of all the conference champions. That's the big difference.
That's true. And I was an 8 person. I, like you, Mark, I think you were an 8 person. I was an 8 person. I was never a 12 person.
Yeah. No buys.
Yes. Mark, you're right. Anti-buys. No buys. But the thing about it is, you know, I think Porter was mentioned earlier about reforming. Did he mention reforming the schedule or reducing the schedule, or them making modifications to the schedule about there being too many games? Yeah, I mean, remember, it's about dollars, folks. Everything comes back to the dollar. I mean, honestly, they probably should modify the schedule. Maybe take a look at going back to an 11-game schedule, but they're not going to do it.
Yeah, then what do you do with all the teams out there that only play 11 games now instead of 12? You've got to compensate them in some way to
Yeah,
make up for that.
that's true. Yeah, back to the revenue. Well, as always, I know you got more callers. Like and subscribe, ladies and gentlemen. This is the man. He is the man that gives college football its voice, the great Mark Rogers. And it's always a pleasure to talk college football with you, my friend.
Always good to see you, David. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Take care.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football, but we will pick off this super chat first from our buddy Shoelace Sooner, who says, I just got an email from the president of OU. So this just in. It states that Oklahoma is going to the SEC in 2024. So this funneled its way from Shoelace Sooner all the way to the major outlets. Then we received it from them. All I needed to do was to text Shoelace Sooner, and we could have beaten ESPN to the punch next time. All right, but also working on becoming an AAU member. Interesting. Okay. Those not necessarily connected, would they be? Maybe if that was a move to the Big Ten. All right. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, we've got our buddy Rick on the line.
Mark, good evening. How are we doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Fantastic. Thanks for having your show tonight, and great hearing the earlier callers and everybody's opinion on the game we all love. Something's great, something's not so great, but pleased to see that the SEC is going to be bringing aboard Oklahoma and Texas in 2024. You knew that was going to happen. Smart people that have a chance to make a lot of money figured it out. So
Yep.
As soon as back in early September, when we went to a 12-team playoff, you knew that was going to happen. It took them a little bit of time, but they figured it out. So congrats to Oklahoma and Texas, and to the SEC, and to the Big 12. Big 12 gets to move on. So one of the things I wanted to bring up, I was watching your show, I think it was last Friday night, and there was a caller, I can't remember who, but they brought up a comment that was made by Joel Klatt. And as you recall, the Wednesday before the last Friday was, I think it's called signing day. It was kind of a blip. Do you recall? Joel Klatt, I guess the caller made a comment that Joel Klatt had said that, USC is kind of failing in recruiting because they only had 2 players out of 7 in California that were in the top 100. They only signed 2
Yes.
players, or something of that nature.
I did not hear Klatt make the comment, but I did hear that from a caller. Yes.
Well, the caller was quoting Klatt, but
yes.
Klatt,
Yep.
I'd seen that as well, and I was a little surprised by Klatt making that comment because Klatt I consider him a well-informed source.
Absolutely.
A former quarterback at Colorado who has a very good understanding of the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and he's kind of on top of the pulse of the changes in college football, and he lets his opinion be known. Would you agree with that comment, Mark?
Yeah, I've got great respect for Joel Klatt.
So the one thing that Joel didn't share, which unfortunately, if you don't have insight, and that's why I'm giving you a call, is just to maybe clarify and point this out, because the caller had kind of echoed or puppeted those comments. But if you take a look at the 7 players that are in California that were in the top 100, USC obviously had a quarterback, Malachi Nelson, and they had a wide receiver in Makai Lemon. So they had 2. Those are the 2 of the 7 they had. 2 of the other players were also quarterbacks. Nico Iamaleava, who went to Tennessee, and Jaden Rashada, who went to ASU via Miami and Florida.
Yep.
So there was also another player, Jurian Dickey, who committed to Oregon verbally in early May. And he also signed with them. So my point being is Lincoln Riley would get skewered, or any coach for that matter, to take 3 quarterbacks in the top 100, whether that was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, or in this world of the transfer portal. Would you agree with that comment?
So it's funny because I didn't really give much thought to what was stated by that caller. I just, on one hand, when I hear third party responses or you know, uh, then my first thought is, okay, is that what actually was stated? Is that what was meant, et cetera, et cetera? I didn't have the time nor take the time to go back and check Klatt's comment. But then as you started in on this, my first thought was, okay, this is California, first of all, a lot of quarterbacks. So is Rick going to bring me to a point where he's listing the reasons why USC would not have gotten the bulk of those top 7 players, and it would be because many of them were quarterbacks, and you're not going to take 5 quarterbacks in a recruiting class, and that's certainly what it turned out to be. How
Yeah.
many of them were quarterbacks?
3 of the 7.
3 of the 7. So you're going to take, if you can, you may take 2. Usually it's 1. You may take 2. And you certainly explained a few of the other situations there.
Well, I would say 5 years ago, you could have taken 2. Why would you invest the time and money to today recruit 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not
With
going to
the
do
portal. Yeah.
No, exactly. So that's what I wanted to share with you. And then the other, there was a wide receiver, like I'd mentioned, Jurion Dickey. But why would USC want to sign Jurion Dickey when they already had Zach Branch, the number 4 player in the recruiting class, albeit outside of California, but he was a commit since Lincoln Riley was hired. Okay, he's the number 4 player, number 1 wide receiver in the country, and they had Mekhi Lemon. So why would you take that wide receiver? I think you had just mentioned that in your not so early top 25 breakdown when you were talking about Ohio State, if I'm remembering your conversation correctly, that Ohio State has 3 top wide receivers in the class, but really you want to be looking at the cornerbacks. That's who you want to be taking a look at. Do you recall making that statement, Mark?
Yes. If you look at Ohio State's top 5 players signed in this last recruiting class, 3 of the top 5 are wide receivers, which that's phenomenal. They continue to bring in just the best haul of wide receivers. However, considering the makeup of their team, that's where there needs to be some judgment along with just the recruiting rankings. Because for me, that's great. Those are all talented players, and they may turn out to all be tremendous players, but Ohio State's not addressing needs there with all those wide receivers. They're a little imbalanced in their recruiting. Just like I looked up Lincoln Riley's 2020 class at Oklahoma just because I was trying to get a read on Alex Grinch more than anything. And and there was a conversation on the USC show about his level of recruiting, and 8 of the top 9 players in that 2020 class at Oklahoma were offensive players.
Right. So can you imagine what Joel Klatt would be saying if USC had 3 quarterbacks from California and 3 wide receivers in the class?
Yeah.
Yeah. It just, I mean, you can't win. So the last 2 players were Mateo Uiagalelei, edge from St. John Bosco.
Yep.
And number 91, cornerback Roderick Pleasant out of Serra. Now, congrats to Oregon. They got those 2 players, and it was a heated recruiting battle. And good luck to Mateo. A lot of film on him playing tight end. Not so much great film on him playing edge, but they signed those players. So the one thing that Joel Klatt didn't talk about also is transfer portal. You know, he makes it seem like Lincoln Riley and USC is not recruiting well, but here's a guy who's a Colorado alum, and why do you think Colorado is being talked about today? Because they did very well recruiting and in the transfer portal. If you take a look at Deion Sanders, That's a part of college football these days, is how well you work the transfer portal. And in 2022, USC had the number 1 class in the transfer portal. And in 2023, right now, going into spring ball, they're ranked number 3. And so what 24/7 Sports does is they do an overall ranking where they, as you know, they compile the high school and the transfer portal recruiting. Are you familiar with that, Mark?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you look at it, now that early signing day is done, December signing day is done, and the 45-day transfer window closed on January 18th. The overall combined USC had the number. They have the combined number 8 class, and Oregon has the number 9 class. Oregon has 39 commits. USC has 33. So it's basically a wash. So getting back to it, sometimes you have to dissect information that comes out because it's not accurate.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And thank you for taking us through all of that, because you're exactly right. There has to be a lot of context taken to these classes. And now with the transfer portal, shoot, exactly what you say. I look at the transfer portal every day. I look at the commitment list for both 2023, and now obviously we put a bow on that. But 2024, I look at the commitment list several times a day just to make sure that I'm up on it and I'm ready to post something if needed, and look at the transfer portal. And that there are obviously schools that are lagging in the transfer portal. There are other ones that are ahead of the curve, and they're supplementing their classes greatly. So that has to be when the average team, and I'm just making up numbers, but I think I'm going to hit this fairly close, is signing 22 to 25 high school players in a cycle, and they're signing 8 to 10 to 12 in what we could call free agency out of the transfer portal. Well, that ranking becomes, in sheer numbers, it's half as valuable as the recruiting ranking, number 1. But number 2, those are generally proven players. So you could even say it's more valuable than half of that recruiting ranking, because these are guys that have proven that they can play at this level, most of them. So that transfer portal ranking has to be taken into strong consideration.
You're absolutely correct. You just took my point, Mark. So I totally agree with you on that. Because if you take a look at it, you just hit it on the head. Because a lot of these high school kids are being recruited for a year. Okay. And, for instance, USC brought in 21 players. And in a 45-day window, once that player hits the transfer portal and you're able to communicate with them and bring them to your campus and make an offer and sign them, there's a 45-day window, and USC picked up 12 players. And other schools that need to rebuild their rosters have that same advantage. So taking a look at that, the biggest question mark, as everybody knows, as we saw at the Cotton Bowl, is USC's defense. Okay, they addressed some concerns in the first transfer portal, but when you start off having 9 commits in your high school class after that other coaching staff left, you have a lot of work to do uphill, and there's only so many needs that you can address. And USC was thin on defense, and it caught up to them. So, taking a look at it, going back to the high school recruiting, USC addressed the need by getting Braylon Shelby, a 4-star edge out of Texas. He was in the top 100. He was like 85, I think. And they got Tackett Curtis. He was just outside the top 100 at number, I think, 108. He won the Louisiana State Player of the Year, top linebacker. So there's 2 needs that are addressed. And if you look at the transfer portal, like you were bringing up, Mark, they addressed in their front 7, they signed 4 guys that were 4 stars and 2 guys that were actually 3 guys that were 3 stars. So they addressed, one of them was Anthony Lucas, defensive lineman out of Texas A&M. was part of that 2022 class. They got Jack Sullivan for Purdue, Mason Cobb, who had 96 tackles, linebacker out of Oklahoma State. They got a 4-star cornerback, Christian Roland Wallace, out of Arizona, who's very familiar with the Pac-12 and has experience. He's kind of like this year's Mekhi Blackman from Colorado, who was an outstanding cornerback at SC this year, and who's invited to the NFL Combine. And they got a defensive lineman from Arizona as well, Kion Bars, that has. So this year is different. They found out what their needs are, and they had a season under their belt to prove that the coaching and the program was working. Where last year there was limited numbers of quality players that they could attract because it was just a concept, right? And so, like you had mentioned, the transfer portal, you have proven players that can come in, step in, and that's what a team like Georgia and Alabama, they don't need as many transfers, so they just high spot and maybe get 4 or 5 players. Same with Ohio State. But teams that are like ASU, Colorado, USC last year, Oklahoma last year, Oregon last year, they have to overhaul a roster. And now with the transfer portal, you're able to do it. I mean, what's interesting is this is like 2.0 right now because people saw what USC did last year. Look at Colorado. They have a total of 44 players. They're basically turning over half the roster when you take a look at the transfer portal and their high school recruiting class. ASU has 47. It's just amazing what has happened in the second year of really a focusing on transfer portal with new coaches coming in.
Absolutely, Rick. I've got the calls piling up, but great insight out of you as always. Appreciate you being here.
Great, Mark. Thanks a lot. Good talking with you.
Thank you, Rick. Our guy, LBC Trojan, who helps us out with our USC post game, of course, with Tim and Tony. That post game just took off last year. It was phenomenal. I want to get to these calls. We're going to be a little tighter. I want to give everybody their time. So don't worry, I'm not going to rush you through, but we'll just be a little bit tighter with these calls because they're piling up. And I saw a few people drop off that were waiting in line. And I hate to see that when people are waiting for a long, long time and then they just get frustrated and don't stay on the line. But I will answer this question from B Bean. B Bean, thanks for being here. I don't know when you started to watch and when you showed up, but I always see your encouraging comments in the chat. So thank you for being here. When are you going to have an SEC show, Mark? So I got to say, man, we've got Ohio State, Michigan, Nebraska, Iowa, Oklahoma, Florida State, Miami, West Virginia. I may be missing somebody. USC, of course. So we don't have any SEC shows. So do I have anything against the SEC? Absolutely not. Sponsorship. So give me a sponsor and I will start a show. I will start a Vandy show tomorrow if you get a sponsor. There we go. So we need a sponsor to start shows. So we are not needlessly starting any other channels or shows without any backing. All right. So that's the bottom line deal right there. Land Found, what's going on tonight?
Not much. How are you?
I'm doing well. What you been up to?
Staying out of trouble.
Okay, that's good to know. I didn't know that you were in trouble, but it's good to know that you're staying out of it now. Good.
Yeah. I once called you and asked if the title of your show is X, but I'm calling about Y. Is it okay if we still talk about Y? And you said, Land Found, we can talk about anything you want to talk about. Is that still in effect, Mark? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I think his internet dropped. He'll be back in 1 second. Hold on a minute.
All right. Hopefully,
Oh,
whether that was thanks, Tim. I appreciate you doing that. I just texted Tim to jump on there and help us out. So whatever that was, it was either StreamYard or the internet. I don't know, or both. Back to Landfound. What's going on?
I'm afraid it
Hello,
might happen
Landfound.
again because of my location. Can you hear?
I'm sorry. What's that?
Can you hear me?
Yes. What's going on?
I'm afraid it might keep happening again because of my location. But when I went somewhere else with the phone, the connection was better. So either we have to take the
Oh.
risk, or I can
We'll
keep
take the
going, I
risk.
guess, or find a better spot.
Yes. Yeah. Just keep talking.
Okay. I once called you and asked if the title of your show was X, but I'm calling about Y. Is it okay if we talk about Y? And you
Oh,
said we can
absolutely. We
talk
can
about
talk about
anything that you want to talk about.
yes. Anything about college
Is
football.
that's
Every time.
right?
Yes.
Is that still in effect?
Yes, absolutely.
If you were just hired as the CEO of a corporation, big corporation, top corporation, and one of the top guys first time in a t-shirt, either what would you think about that?
All I heard was if I was just hired as the CEO of a corporation and something about a t-shirt. Who's wearing the t-shirt?
Yeah. If
I
your
lost you.
quarterback came to meet you,
Oh, the
you're the
quarterback.
head coach, and
Yes.
you're the quarterback of the University of Miami, and you came to meet you head coach in a t-shirt. What does that say about you as a quarterback of the University of Miami, or any Power 5 or any college football program in the country?
What is the setting of the meeting?
I pointed that out.
I'm sorry, what's that?
It was a formal meeting. I'm going to meet you for the first time. You're the head coach. I'm the quarterback. And I come to meet you in a t-shirt. I would say minimum, I would put on a polo, dress pants, or some nice jeans to go meet my coach. I pointed that out.
You are talking to the right guy, because I don't think necessarily, and I interviewed tons of people at my last position, and we would even many times interview internal candidates that were going for, let's say, a promotion, and some of them thought, you already know me, I already work here, I don't really have to dress up for this. But others took it as a serious thing to impress and put their best foot forward. So I'm absolutely, and certainly considering my mom always thought that we should look our best, and she probably wouldn't be too happy with my attire the last few years on this show. But anyway, that we should look our best, especially in certain circumstances. I'm old school, and I come from your side of things, so I'm right there with you.
I merely pointed that out. I got laughed out of a thread. And I'm saying, but what's going on? We saw the season that time.
Landfound,
you have
hopefully
to notice.
We'll give you a second for this to clear up, and if it doesn't, we'll have to let you go.
Can you?
All right. Landfound, call us back sometime when you think you've got a better connection. We appreciate it. All right, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. Undisputed is on the line.
Hello, Mark. Hello.
That might be a decent name for a show.
Hey, I'm not trademarking it, so you can take it if you want to.
No, I think it's been taken, but we've got the Voice of College Football, and we're happy with that. The government has actually backed us on that, so we are the Voice of College Football. Yes.
Good. So I don't know, Pac-12 expansion. Talk about like getting Utah State, Colorado State, but how about getting UNLV in the conference of Pac-12? You're in Las Vegas, the conference championship is in Las Vegas. It would make sense to expand to where the conference championship game is at. I know they haven't won a conference championship since like 1994 in the Big West. I know they haven't won a conference bowl game since 2000 and haven't made a bowl game since 2014. But they kind of have the history there. A football team's kind of down, but they have a good basketball team.
So the ACC should go after Charlotte, The Big Ten should go after what? Indiana State, and the SEC should go after Georgia Tech.
Well, I'm not saying it just because. Well, I'm not saying all the conferences should expand and get
I'm just
everybody.
kidding.
Yeah,
But
I know what I'm saying.
so you're looking at the qualifications of UNLV. Well, based on our buddy Tony Altimore's metrics that are first rate, we know that UNLV, from a academic standpoint, does not measure up to the standards of the Pac-12. That doesn't completely take them out of the running,
No,
but it's
no.
certainly a knock against them.
Mhm.
Also, just because your conference championship game's located there, now Las Vegas is a very desirable location for a number of reasons. It's arguably the entertainment capital of the country, and it's growing just like a lot of Western locations, the major cities in Arizona and otherwise. At least based on my latest information, it's been growing for 30 years. I don't know if it's currently growing, but I would assume that it is. It's a vibrant city and so forth. And the stigma of gambling and all of that has been taken away. But it's a lousy football program and
True.
not a first-rate university to
Right,
the
right.
standard of the Pac-12.
Yeah, I'm like, I know they want to go to Texas, probably go after Rice or whatever, but
And
something
they
closer.
unfortunately play in an NFL city now, and so they're
True.
completely overshadowed by the NFL.
But is it the same thing with Rice and Houston? They play in NFL city. I know the Texans aren't that good, but still, they still play in NFL city.
You're absolutely right. They do. But again, Rice in particular is an academic giant, and also they've had not more success. Rice hasn't had more success on the field. They've both been pretty lousy, but Houston has had success on the field. Those locations, when it comes to recruiting, are also just remarkable. You could basically recruit an NFL team if you stay within 40 miles of Houston, Texas.
Right. Also, too, I want to get your opinion on maybe if the Big 12 were to expand again, let's say like 2 more teams, what do you think Memphis would be in the running for that? Or what do you think you're trying to go after Arizona State? Arizona has been rumored before, and then Colorado and Utah.
Okay, if I'm the Big 12, and again, based on the information and more so just the insight that Tony gives us on expansion, let's not rule out, but let's strongly consider any defections from the Pac-12 to the Big 12 to be very improbable. But if I'm the Big 12 and I've got my say to go anywhere and find anyone that's reasonable, I would rather have Arizona State rather than Memphis and somebody else.
Yeah, like I live in Arizona, so I know. Again, you were talking about like if Arizona State wants to go, then Arizona's going to join them just because
Yeah, they come as a pair.
Mm-hmm.
You stake your ground out west. They're growing from the standpoint of it's become a very good football playing state with a lot of great recruits. Arizona is going up the recruiting rankings when it comes to high school football talent, and they're growing areas.
Oh my God! I'm like, I can't see Cal Stanford ever leaving that Pac-12 or going to Big 12 or any other school in California because they have the higher academic standards. But I can definitely see maybe them going after maybe a Big 12 school. Maybe I know Texas A&M says they want to join a Big 10. Maybe they go after like another Texas school like Texas Tech or whatever, and they have them join a Pac-12.
Yeah, it comes down to this. If a conference believes that it is on the brink of, and I don't think the Pac-12 is on the brink of disaster or on the brink of imploding or anything like that, but obviously their numbers have been, it's almost like when the Big 12 had Texas and Oklahoma, and they were already the smallest Power 5 conference. So, they did exactly what I believed they were going to do and suggested, not that they took my recommendation by any stretch, but I immediately said the 4 best options out there are Houston, BYU, UCF, and Cincinnati. And that's, lo and behold, what they did to stabilize their league. But outside of survival, outside of stabilizing your league, your next your next checklist item is simply, we have to measure this school, their athletic program, football in particular, and all the components involved, TV market, everything. We have to take all that into consideration. And is this institution going to add value to us in terms of determining we're going to have to split the pool of the conference revenue, an additional slice for them? Are they going to make up for, in the Big 12's case, we're shelling out 32 or 38 million. I forget what the number is. I think it's $31.7 million of TV revenue for everyone. Are they going to bring us at least that much in value?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're going to have to slice the pie, one other slice, for them to take that money.
Yeah, and I think that's what they're talking about with Boise State when you're talking about, oh yeah, Boise State's going to join the Big 12. They're going to do all this and stuff. Like, Boise State's not going to do anything. They play in Idaho. Who wants to go to Idaho? Like, is really Boise State going to give them enough money to actually say, oh yeah, we're a good conference, we can have all these big TV deals? Like,
yeah, Boise State has one thing going for it. They've built a really good football program that has been the best Group of 5 program over the last 20 years, but nobody lives there. And the people that live there, I'm sure, are avid Boise State fans. You know, they put people in the stadium, but they probably take about 87% of the population and put it in that stadium.
Yeah. But like, I don't know. It's up in the air right now. You know, Big 12 trying to take the Pac-12, Pac-12 trying to take the Big 12. It's all up in the air right now.
All right, Undisputed.
Thank you, Mark.
Call back anytime.
Will do.
All right, we will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. I do want to go to a damn beast media. I don't know what the rest of the title is, but this is the first time we've heard from you, sir. So it's good to see you.
How are you this evening?
I'm doing just fine. What's going on?
Well, not a lot. I mean, I'm a frequent visitor to the chat, and I really enjoy the fact that you guys are devoting your talk to college football over the course of the year, right? Because it's a long off season, and I don't know. I frequent, and I've been told in the past I ought to call in, so I figured I'd give it a shot. I don't really have anything particular on the docket, but just say hello, introduce myself. I'm busy in the chat, so why not?
Yeah. So let me ask you this: how long have you been watching?
Oh, this stream or
yes, the channel.
Oh, the channel.
Yes.
It was probably late last spring, maybe.
Okay.
Heading through the summer. I guess it was just something that was suggested to me along the way, right? So, and I checked it out a few times, and here I am. Now, I've been here a lot longer than this title would tell you.
Okay.
I was under another title for a while, but that's okay. But
very nice. Well, I do recognize your handle, and so once I saw you pop up there, I was glad to see that we would get to speak. So you certainly are welcome to call back anytime.
Oh yeah, I don't know. There's been so much ground covered this evening. I've covered a lot of space in the chat there. I don't really have anything to add to. I mean, the news tonight was pretty interesting. The 2024 move for the SEC. So that was what got my night started as we opened it up. But like you, I figured there's no way that 2024 could come and go without those two teams being in the league. It just makes too much sense. There's too much money there. So it'll be interesting to see them get in here, and that's going to change our schedules, obviously, to probably a 3-6 here in the conference. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you being here. Anything else?
No, that's it. Just go Dogs, and I'll be around in the chat. So feel free to hit me up.
All right, man. Have a good night.
Take care.
David Greenshield, thank you so much for the contribution, sir. We appreciate you so much. Long-term better upgrade, Big Ten with, of course, USC and UCLA, or the SEC with Oklahoma, Texas. I think short-term, he's going USC, UCLA, looking good. Okay. I think that there's no question that overall, historically, and right this second, that Oklahoma and Texas together are a better pair than USC, UCLA, because of obviously UCLA being a cut below, at least a cut below the other three. However, what's important going forward is playing well in the playoff. And USC, I think right now is positioned the best to be the best program in the near future. And the Big Ten could be fine with UCLA being a 7-5 team, going to a bowl game, just being fairly respectable, and they're okay. They fill the need. They bring people to the coast. You know, we send out Penn State and Ohio State and everyone else for attractive matchups, and they don't set the world on fire, but they're not an embarrassment, going to be anything close to an embarrassment to the league. Rutgers, Maryland. But USC. So if Oklahoma and Texas grind out 8 and 4 years in the SEC, and let's say UCLA does become, I don't anticipate this, but let's say they're winning 4 and 5 games in the Big Ten, but USC is challenging Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State for supremacy, and they're going into the playoff as a champion or as a second or third team in the Big Ten. That's going to be of more value than the combined marginal when I say marginal, top 25 status of Oklahoma and Texas, speaking strictly from a football standpoint. All right. Tim's here. Sorry for the call there, but you were ready to roll for me, so I appreciate that.
That's okay. I didn't know if you're coming back or not, so I hopped in. Well, just really quickly, Rick and I were kind of talking on the same topic, so he took a lot of it. I want to put a bow on that. I saw in the chat someone said the fact, or even you brought up the fact about Riley's team from, what did you say, 2018, you said?
Well, what happened was, and you may have heard this possibly on the USC show the other night, a lot of people were making, of course, disparaging comments about Alex Grinch, and we were taking it beyond his performance this past season to, okay, is he the kind of recruiter that's going to go out and get those kind of players for USC? And I just started picking around at his classes at Oklahoma, and obviously those Oklahoma. Now, this also has to do with the lack of defensive talent outside of Texas in the Midwest. In Iowa, Kansas, Oklahoma, in that region, Missouri, it's been proven that the NFL talent is just not there defensively. And and obviously Lincoln Riley can pull offensive players from anywhere to Oklahoma. So those classes were somewhat lopsided. Now, how much Alex Grinch had to do with that, I don't know.
Right. Well, I think that Matt Zemek on the Riley files, that his guy did a good job with that. His Oklahoma insider, he brought the fact that one of the points of contention from Riley and why Riley was actually looking around is he felt he wasn't receiving the support that other winning programs were getting. He made that very clear, and that makes a lot of sense. And to Oklahoma's credit, though, it looks like they opened up those purse strings, and they are throwing the bags out there because their recruiting class is amazing this year. They're doing a great job. And I think I've said in the past, I have no idea. I do know that it did look like that whatever the situation, the reasons, the staff, whatever it might have been, it was clear that Riley was not getting the type, recruiting the type of defenses that could play with Georgia, Alabama, right? Ohio State. But that's not necessarily, that's clearly when I say that, it doesn't mean that Oklahoma can. I just said that staff couldn't. What I like about his staff now is of course, you want to play for your coordinator, right? You want to play in a good system, but really you go to play for your position coach, right? Those are the guys that really just stay on you, and they're guys recruiting you all throughout the year. And guys like Sean Nua, and Williams, our defensive back coach, these guys are proven stud developers and stud recruiters. So I'm not worried about going forward. And just to bring the point, so our top 5 guys, all of them, if we want to include Takis Curtis, who's at 108, which is like, you're splitting hairs at 108. There's 5 guys in the top 100. Well, 2 of them, Braylon Shelby, 6'5", 250 out of Texas. Dude has some game film. And I'm a Bosco grad, and I love Mateo Uyungale. I just love that dude. But like Rick said, his most of his film's on the tight end side of the ball. He's a great tight end, but not that much film on defense. And they're recruiting him on potential. He definitely is. He's an athlete and a stud, and I do believe will do well. But I think he's going to be a bit of a project, and USC doesn't have time for a project. Do you know what I mean? I think that he will do well. Mateo is going to do well at Oregon, but it might take a couple of years of development. They grabbed Braylon Shelby and a couple other guys out of the portal because David Greenshield, you said that he's not interested, or you thought he'd do better. Riley's not interested in winning like a recruiting championship. He didn't care if he wins the 247 Rivals Championship in 2023. He wants to build a roster, and how you do that is through the portal. And I think like Rick did another great job bringing up the fact that it's not about the recruiting rankings anymore. It's about that overall ranking, because more than ever, I mean, the portal is just, you guys, football's changed. You do need to beat your base. You do need to get all those studs into your system. The top 5 stars, there's definitely a correlation between 5-star athletes and championships. And so that's where you want to get to. But USC needs guys now on the line. And if you look at their recruiting class, which is like an 8 or 9 overall, is solid with trench guys, with guys that are going to be right away making differences inside, at the line of scrimmage, where on defense, we were getting our asses handed to us. And so having Braylon Shelby and Tackett Curtis, both guys probably will play this year. These guys are high caliber, top 100 players. It is being addressed. And I just want to bang my head against the wall when I hear knowledgeable Sooner fans and other fans throughout the country saying, well, he doesn't like to recruit defense. Mark, do any coaches not like to recruit? Would you agree that every coach in America is worried about defense, including Riley? Would you agree?
Coaches want to win.
And you have to do what?
Especially at that level. Yes.
So do you think it's ridiculous to say that he doesn't care about defense? Isn't that a ridiculous comment? Okay. So when we're sitting and watching these guys talk about how Riley is this, Riley is that, we know that Riley 2020 was that. We know Riley 21 was that. We know Riley 22 was that. But let the man evolve. I mean, how many years was Kirby Smart a head coach before he won a championship? How many years was Nick Saban a college coach before he won a championship?
Well, yeah.
I'm not saying that Riley's either one of those men, but I'm saying you don't just walk up and all of a sudden win championships. So if a guy doesn't want a championship in 5 years, in 6 years, people want to bury him like, oh, well, he sucks. He's never going to win. I think that's just some wishful thinking.
Yeah.
And I like the way he's building the roster. He's not trying to play any games. He's made it very clear he'd rather spend his money on keeping his players, right? Giving them, right, the NIL stuff, giving proven guys. Like we got the 5-star Lucas from Texas A&M, who is a stud defensive end. That's where you want to spend your money, not on guys that might be a mystery. So enough of that. Sorry, I'm off. I called because Rick was too humble. Next Wednesday on the Pac-12 show, we are going to have Rick's going to break down the transfer portal and what the coaching staff at Nebraska and Wisconsin are doing, and the impact it's going to make as these new coaching regimes kind of change. It's the evolution of football now. You don't have to wait 2 to 3 years to have your guys come in. And Rick's done a great job, done all the homework for it. And he's going to show like what Colorado has done, what Wisconsin has done, Nebraska. So Pac-12 and Big 10 fans, come check it out because he's done his homework. And we all know Rick can bring it. He just brought it a few minutes ago. So please come check us out. And we got a big surprise. I know you know what the surprise is, Mark, but we're going to wait till Wednesday to unleash that on everybody. So
I'm
we
glad
appreciate
I
all
know
the
it's on
support.
my channel. So it's a good thing that I found out about it. That's good.
That's Tony. He's the responsible one. I'm the maverick of the group. I was just going to throw it at you. But we got Tony. We got the adult. Tony's the adult in the room. So
it's good to have an adult in the room, especially when it's my property being played with. But I've put it in good hands. You guys are good to roll and run with whatever you've got. Everything's been good so far. So again, Tim is talking about the Pac-12 live chat show that is every Wednesday in that 10:30 Eastern time range. I believe it was at 11 this past week, but in that range. On Wednesday evening, 7 Pacific, and it's a good time.
Yeah. So we look forward to everyone come checking it out. Again, we're not just covering Pac-12 breakdowns. We're trying to spread out the rest of the country and cover some other teams and new coaching changes. So come check Rick lay it out, you guys. And we'll see you guys all next Wednesday.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tim.
All right.
Appreciate
Thank you.
And I think I'm going to go to work on a lot of breakdowns concerning Oklahoma versus the SEC. What does that look like? Texas versus the SEC. And of course, we've got USC and UCLA against the Big Ten. And then what about all of those teams in those respective conferences that have to face USC and UCLA? It may not be pretty for the likes of Iowa. I'm pointing at Iowa because, of course, Northwestern's nowhere close to Iowa. Rutgers, Northwestern, those teams are nowhere close to Iowa, but the expectations are also not there. But out of the teams that are winning in the Big Ten Western Division, Iowa seems to be a little bit vulnerable, as does Purdue, obviously, in losing its head coach in trying to keep pace with what they've accomplished recently and win at that rate. And certainly, USC and UCLA are not going to make a huge mark against any one of those teams in particular because they can only play them twice at the most. But if you think about it, you do the math on it, if USC or UCLA is a designated team that's going to play any one of those teams each season, and then the other one plays against those teams every other season, well, that's 3 games every 2 years that the way things are sizing up right now look like for some programs like Iowa, like Nebraska, they're looking like they're going to be losing, unless they get better, going to be losing that matchup 75 to 80% of the time. So there is going to be change in the Big Ten. There is right now entering the Big Ten what is going to be the 3rd or 4th best program in the Big Ten today, but with the potential, Ohio State and Michigan fans included, listen to this, the potential to be the best program in the conference. And UCLA, who knows what their potential is? It's probably to be the reasonably, not that they couldn't ascend to past this, but probably their potential, reasonably speaking, conservatively, is to be the 3rd or 4th, 5th best program in the conference. And again, even if they disappoint and they become another Purdue or Maryland and they go 7-5 and go to bowl games every year, that they will still serve a purpose in terms of having a Rose Bowl venue for the Big Ten to play in during the regular season and possibly in a conference championship game. And they will have a major brand to add with USC on the West Coast. And the property of the game between USC and UCLA will now be a Big Ten property to showcase. And then the addition of UCLA playing a national schedule, usually against national opponents. I know they certainly didn't do it this year or in the last few years, but they have historically. That's all valuable to the Big Ten. So if USC becomes USC again and UCLA stays UCLA, 8-4 UCLA, that is still an enormous addition. And even UCLA is a valuable addition to the Big Ten. All right, everyone. Appreciate you being here. On Friday, we've got our West Virginia show with Gold and Blue Dude right here at the Voice of College Football on the main channel. And listen, if for any of you still hanging on with us at this point, which isn't many, you know what? I won't even look it up. But our West Virginia channel could use your help. We need to get to 1,000 subscribers. We're about 220 shy of that. So look up the West Virginia channel here at the Voice of College Football. If you enjoy what we do, think big picture, meaning you might hate West Virginia. You may hate Oklahoma. Pick out your team channel. We've got 25 of them, and we really operate about 15 at this point. You may hate many of those teams, but if you enjoy what we're doing here, and even if you think, well, I only want to support the Michigan channel because that's all I care about is the Michigan channel, understand the bigger picture. Because if we cease to exist, then the Michigan channel is going to cease to exist. So please support all of the channels. And even if you hate that particular team, you know what? Sub to those channels that are sub 1,000 subscribers, because that is a key metric in the YouTube algorithms. And then, you know what? Once we get safely over 1,000 subs, unsubscribe. That is perfectly fine. And we would appreciate all of your support. Again, on Friday, it is at the very least going to be a West Virginia night with Gold and Blue Dude. And who knows, we may crank up the phone lines once again on Friday night. Right here at the Voice of College Football. Plenty of great content coming your way. Please look out for it. And we will see you soon. And as Todd tells us right there, all channels are pretty damn good. We'll take that as an endorsement from Todd. Thank you, sir.